volcano in Iceland sends a toxic cloud across Europe. Crops fail. Bread gets expensive. 5 years later, a nation explodes. Could a single eruption have nudged France toward revolution? In this video, the eruption, the haze over Europe, the harvest shocks in France, and the fragile political arithmetic that turned hunger into upheaval. On June 8, 1783, a 27-kilometer fissure, Laki, opened in southern Iceland. Over months, it released massive quantities of sulfur gases into the atmosphere, a plume that crossed the North Atlantic and hung as a haze over Europe. The eruption was a hemisphere-scale atmospheric event, and Europe noticed. Sulfur dioxide turns into sulfate aerosols, which scatter sunlight and change cloud behavior. That doesn't mean a uniform cooling. It means noisy, regional changes in sunlight and rainfall timing. Agriculture hates noise. Planting windows shift, ripening changes. Pests behave differently. Aerosols create climate disturbance, not destiny. They create conditions that can break fragile harvests. Contemporary observers reported a dry fog, blood-red suns, and odd seasonal weather across summer 1783 and into 1784. Diaries, newspapers, and magistrates' notes recorded unusual heat spells, respiratory problems, and localized crop stress in many regions of Europe. Eyewitnesses: the sky looked wrong, and the records preserve those odd skies. France's harvests in the 1780s were volatile. In particular, the drought and crop failure of 1788 produced a severe shortfall. Real wages fell, and bread prices spiked. Agricultural historians show that 1787 to 1788 to 1789 were unusually bad years for grain yields and market stability. Precisely the period that fed popular anger. Bad harvests push prices up, and the poor feel those spikes first. Put the threads together. Laki injected aerosols that altered regional climate patterns. Ice core and model work show a sulfate spike and plausible radiative forcing. European observers report anomalous weather, and France experiences recurring harvest weakness culminating in 1788. Multiple recent climate model studies and reconstructions make this linkage plausible. Laki likely contributed to increased climate variability and crop stress across northern Europe. Plausible pathway, not proof of one-to-one causation, but a credible amplifier. Local records give texture. Municipal price records, parish harvest tallies, and magistrates' petitions show rising bread prices and appeals for relief. For example, provincial cahiers and market notices record higher grain prices and rural distress in the late 1780s, the grain shortages people saw in markets and at bakeries. These are the small, sharp facts that make the big pattern visible to ordinary people. But harvest shocks must meet political fragility to become revolution. France of the 1780s had heavy public debt, an inefficient tax system, and a political class unable to reform. When grain prices soared and the crown could not quickly import or subsidize food, popular anger translated into political action, petitions, riots, and eventually mass mobilization. Climate stress is dangerous where institutions are brittle. Here's the pivot. Laki didn't create France's fiscal crisis, but its likely contribution to a string of poor seasons shortened the interval to collapse. In plain terms, the eruption probably increased the frequency and severity of bad harvest years. Those bad years raised bread prices, increasing unrest, and narrowing the time window for political fixes. An accelerant doesn't light the fire alone, but it turns sparks into flames faster. Scholars caution strongly. Revolutions arise from long-term social, economic, and political processes. Class structures, state finances, ideas. Many studies treat Laki as one factor among many. Some climate reconstructions show mixed regional signals. Other climatic influences, El Niño, other eruptions, and poor governance also mattered. We do not claim Laki caused the revolution. We test whether it contributed meaningfully. And the best evidence says it plausibly did as an amplifier. Evidence points to contribution, not determinism. So what can we conclude? The Laki eruption was a large climatic shock whose aerosols plausibly increased weather variability in Europe. When those extra stresses hit France's fragile food and fiscal systems in the late 1780s, they helped sharpen grievances that authorities could not solve. Laki wasn't the cause, but it was a meaningful contributor, an environmental accelerant in an explosive political setting. If a volcanic plume could help hasten a revolution, what climate-driven stresses are we letting accumulate today?